Hi everybody, Levi Clay here, and I'm back again for another lesson. This time I'm going to be answering a question for one of my patrons, but also dealing with an analysis of the Josh Smith blues piece that I posted on my YouTube channel just yesterday. So I'm going to start by reading the question because it's an interesting one, and I'm sure it's one that many of you will be able to relate to. This is a struggle that many people go through. It's a struggle that I went through, and from time to time I can kind of lose sight of the answer and get stuck up in it again. So here's Patrick's question. He says, my problem with transcribing is that I always stumble upon phrases that are over my head at the moment. This is the case with that 2-bar phrase in the Josh Smith solo that I transcribed. I didn't get what it was. Now, when I transcribe things, I don't just want to learn how to play it, but I really want to understand what it is and why it works over the chord so that I'll be able to integrate those ideas into my own playing. With jazz, as it's a more complicated form of music in terms of harmony and scale choices, this would be much worse. To really benefit from transcribing a solo like the Josh Smith one, will I first have to learn all the typical substitutions in a jazz blues that Josh implies in his lines and how to outline those as well as the scale types that go with them? So that's a deep question, right? And I do understand the frustration. I vividly remember getting my first transcriptions, not my own, but actually purchasing transcriptions, you know, Joe Pass solos and things like that, and I would have the harmony written above them, obviously, and then I would sit with a pencil and above or below each note I would write the interval. So, you know, oh, that's the root, that's the flat 7, there's the third, so on and so forth. And I was trying to relate them back to the chord, back to the harmony, so I could have a better understanding of why the notes that were being played were being played. Now, in retrospect, I can look at that and say that was totally the wrong way to go about it. It wasn't necessarily a waste of my time because having that more, you know, harmonic-based approach to my analysis and understanding of music can never really hurt you. But it's certainly not the ethos with which Joe Pass was approaching his soloing, and it's not the ethos with which Josh Smith is approaching his soloing. So the thing that I found very interesting about what you're saying here, Patrick, is you don't get to dictate what you need to do. You can obviously say what you want to do. So you say that you want to, you don't just want to learn to play it, but you want to understand what it is and why it works over the chord. And then it's not really a contradiction, but it kind of is when you say, so that I will be able to integrate those ideas into my own playing. So let's talk about jazz, or blues, or rock, or whatever it happens to be, as a stylistic thing. And music being a language. So music is very much a language. It's something we use to express ourselves and communicate ideas. Now, the example that I like to think of is blues, right? Blues, generally speaking, a major blues, this example is a blues in A, right? It's a blues in A, right? Now, generally speaking, when you hear someone play over a dominant 7 chord in a blues, you will hear them play these pool of notes often. Now that's me playing minor, obviously. I'm playing minor over a dominant chord. I'm playing the blues scale. So the flat 3rd contradicts the chord, the flat 5 contradicts the chord. Why do you allow that? Why do you learn ideas like that and accept them as fact? Well, you accept them as fact because stylistically it's correct. You don't learn them and go, well, these are the correct scales. You learn them and say, well, these are the scales that people use. This is the language that they happen to use. I don't think you start with the scale either. I think you start with the musical phrases and the ideas, and then you can analyse it post and say, well, this happens to be that scale. But it doesn't always have to be a case of it fitting perfectly. So we can learn a blues phrase. The phrase might be... super simple phrase, but in the long run, there's nothing wrong with musically using that without having to describe where it comes from and why it works. So why am I telling you this? Well, again, if we think in terms of language, I'm in a great position to be able to talk about something like this because I moved from England to Scotland. I live in Scotland now. And the slang terms for everyday communication are different here, much that they would be different if I moved to Newcastle or if I moved to Liverpool. Now, I'm just using examples of the UK, but you know, we're a very diverse country. You can move 50 miles down the road and people start having different words for things. They have different ways to communicate authentically with each other. And that will be the case no matter what country you're in. If you move 100 miles away from where you are, people start to develop different usages of words, if you like. Now, jazz is a great example of that. Jazz, to me, with experience now, is much, much more about learning not why someone does what they do, but learn what they do. Do what they do. They don't think in terms of, I need to play this scale, I need to do this, I need to do that. It's very much a case of, what's the melody? Here's a melody, I'm going to play the melody, you know, does it work, does it not work? You will see it all the time with players like Joe Pass. So I'm going to jump into the Josh Smith transcription and show you what I mean. So, yeah, if you look at that first phrase, I'll highlight the bits that I'm working on as I go. So the first phrase, blues in A, so we lead in with this phrase. And that's very typical vocabulary around an A chord. Now at this point in a blues, we're going to the 4 chord. It's quick change blues. So he plays, which is, you know, you could think of it as a tritone substitution, but that's the point, right? Although this technically is a tritone substitution for an A7, it gives us like an A7 flat 5. That's not the approach. That's not what you learn. You can learn to play a semitone above the chord that you're going to through experience. You don't need to be able to explain what a tritone substitution is, what it works, and the substitution that it's creating. You know what I mean? So, super simple. Now we can learn this as a phrase. Nice and easy. Now our perspective changes. We're on a D chord, or D7, and Josh plays one, let me highlight it. Let's go to here. 3, 4, 1. Now what is that? Well, this fits around our D7. We kind of got the notes of like a D7 arpeggio, I guess would be a nice way of looking at it. The 2nd, the 3rd, the 5th, the flat 7, and then we come down. This is like a D sus2. And then this chord stab is where we play, we're going back to our A chord, so we're approaching an A major triad, which is A with C sharp in the bass, A over C sharp. Now we're playing that triad from a semitone below. So everything we've played so far makes sense. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. A little bit faster. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So not too crazy. Now we've gone back to an A chord, and this is where things get a little bit weird. If I play the phrase, I'm going to start from that 2nd fret. We'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Now, this F natural, Josh plays that. Oh, whoops. Now, there's no denying that that's a weird note choice. And here's the key part. I'm going to bring my face back up here. There are many reasons why someone might play notes that you're not expecting. One of them might be that they're being clever. One of them might be that they are playing something like a substitution. You know, Patrick and I were talking about Mixolydian flat 6 just recently and using that on a blues. So it might be something clever. They might be using a flat 6, Mixolydian flat 6, and imposing that sound, superimposing that sound. That happens. The note also might be being played, these weird notes might be being played because it's a passing tone, like a chromatic passing tone, or it's used as part of something like a chromatic encirclement of an important note or whatever. That happens. Another reason that a note might be being played, and we'll deal with this one as we go on, would be because of tension and release. So when using the principles of tension and release, sure, when you know a lot about music, you can say, well, in order to create tension, I can use the diminished scale, or I can use whole tone, or I could use superlocrian, or I could use Phrygian dominant, or any of these sounds. Or tension could literally just be that. Tension could be notes that don't make sense. It doesn't necessarily need to add up to a scale, it's just tension that is then resolved back to the sound of the chord. So, and you will see that among great players. It happens all the time. A great example of that would be Brian Baker. He does stuff like that all the time. He's got all these crazy, super cool tension ideas that he'll use that resolve. And to be completely honest with you, that's how I hear Alan Holdsworth's music, tension and resolution, rather than going, oh, this is the scale or mode I'm using. I think it's more, you know, here's a symmetrical pattern that I can move around in geometric ways that suit the geometry of the neck, but then I can resolve them to something pleasant. So when we go back to this phrase, we have to ask ourselves, is it that? And the final option is maybe it's just a mistake. No matter what way you look at it, what we're doing here is we're playing an F over an A chord. Now it's got some spice to it. But if I change that F to an F sharp, it's certainly a weird one. I think that in this particular example, that strikes me actually as a mistake. But, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. It adds a little bit of cool tension, colour and spice. It's not a bad note. It's just not the obvious note choice. So, but it totally works, you know, especially when played at speed. Again, the phrase continues, and we're staying on that kind of A sound. If I play this entire phrase, we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4. Which takes us back to our D chord. Now over the D chord, quick analysis. The approach, just from looking at the notes, looks like all of these notes this is blues scale. This is A blues scale. That's my analysis of it. Theoretically, why does this work? Well, theoretically, it doesn't. there's no hiding from that. We've got these. I've written them in as D sharps, but I guess if I change them to the correct enharmonic equivalents, they'd be E flats. This is the flat 9 over a D chord, right? This isn't necessarily the best pool of notes to play, but it totally works because it ties us back to that key center of A. It's tension, which is then resolved by playing this particular phrase, which takes us back to that A major chord. So if I just play up to that point, let me highlight that. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. I messed up the timing reading that a little bit there, but you know, when I get to that, as soon as I play that, it sounds like we've gone back to that A chord, which is the important part, right? So this is tension. Well, this point is tension, which is then resolved on our A chord. And it's done in a stylistic way. I couldn't just over that D chord play 2 bars of D superlocrian. If I tried that, if I went... it doesn't work to my ears. but the blues scale is a more accepted form of tension, and we're going back to that idea of the language, musical language, what players actually do. What's the melody? Let's repeat it. Cool, so we're back on our A chord, nice and easy here. Now, this is the same basic problem that happens in the second part of this chorus. We have this melodic phrase here. Now, if in a jazz blues, at this point in the progression, I would expect the chord to go to an F sharp. We go, which is the sixth chord. Is this a sixth chord? Not really, because we very much got that, you know, this is in A, this is A, passing tone, it's like major pentatonic, and there's that little trill. Now that all works, and sounds like an A chord, which then walks up to a very obvious B minor. Phrase, something like that. Words to that effect. Now, point is, that as a phrase sounds cool to me because of this little tension. Now, if I jump back to this screen, how many times have you heard someone like Stevie Ray Vaughan play this? Well, probably not that last phrase, but... that phrase there. That flat 2 thing that he plays, you can't look at that and go, well, theoretically, how does this work? You look at it and go, this is a stylistic trait of the player. This is something that he does to craft his melodies. And you could look at it as a tension thing or a Texas thing. It doesn't matter how you look at it. The fact is he does do it. There's no clever theoretical explanation, or maybe you could dig and look for one, but the reality is that important? And I would argue that it's not. The fact is it is done. So it happens, do it, more so than it happens, I can't do it unless I understand it. Cool, so yeah, we hit our B minor chord, again very obviously playing the notes of the chord. And then there's kind of an E, well, not kind of an E, that is very much an E. Now, I'm not crazy on this phrase. It kind of switches to A minor here. Now what I want to jump onto, because the rest of the solo is obviously absolutely fine. We're end of the blues, we hit our E chord. Same basic move. The lick in question that Patrick was really asking about was this phrase here. Now this is my favourite type of phrase, to be completely honest with you. We're playing in A, so we play this phrase, and then you have this. Which moves to our E chord. Now, when I listened to this originally and Patrick asked me what's going on there, what is he doing there, I instinctively said, well, he's outlining a 1-6-2-5, because I heard that was what was happening in a blues. Well, at least it sounded like he was going for that 1-6-2-5 at that point. On closer inspection, that's not really what's happening. What's happening here is he's playing over an A chord, and he's dressing up the notes of that A chord. Now, we could analyse it in a lot more detail. We could over-analyse it, and I will. This phrase, you could look at that and say, well, this is like a chromatic approach note going into A major pentatonic. Or you could look at it and say, this is 4 notes from Lydian dominant. It doesn't really matter. The fact is, this is what he plays. So anytime I'm playing a blues, I will play that. I'm going to use it. Now the next thing, this, well, what is this? Again, we could be theoretical about it and say this is a G major 7 arpeggio. And I think it's certainly cool that those notes are played there, but we have to hear it in the context of where it's happening. It's not on its own. We've heard it after this. And we're hearing all of this over an A bass note. Now this all sounds like a sus chord to me. Those are the notes over that A. All of that. Now, from there, what does he play after that? Well, now at this point I want to play these notes. I want to play, in fact, I'll tell you what, I'm going to put some of them in brackets. This one's going to go in brackets. That one's going to go in brackets. That one's going to go in brackets. Now when I do that, the note pool we have is this. It's Mixolydian, it's A Mixolydian. And he's dressing it up with these little chromatic passing tones. To me, we have an approach note to the chord, then we're moving up. Now I usually do that phrase, I'll play. Now here's the really important thing. We find a phrase like this. That's not anything clever. This is movement around the chord form. Now I add in the chromatic bit at the beginning. Now he doesn't finish the phrase like that. We'll see how he finishes it. But the point is, I have to have all of this musical diarrhea, if you like, that I can play around this chord form. The amount of times that you've probably heard me play this. I play that all the time. I can't help myself. So it's the same basic idea, but we've got a new musical phrase. First get familiar with that. It all sounds like an A chord. Now, okay, what does he play in the next bar? We've just finished playing 7th fret. So this is the 6th degree of that A7 chord, and we have what is all of that? Well, same thing, right? It's A Mixolydian, but we've got a passing tone. So that's just a passing tone. Like there's nothing crazy happening there. If I play this entire phrase, we've got passing tone or approach tone. Approach tone. Passing tone. So So that entire phrase, it's not a crazy phrase. I think the thing that's interesting about it is, well, how fluently, or fluidly, I should say, those notes are added to the lick, to the phrase, but also the speed. Like everything up until that point has been this ba da 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 da. And then as soon as this comes in, we're adding that 16th note feel in there, and it's kind of almost akin to that bebop double time thing. It's, yeah. So phrases like this, you just have to get them under your fingers, in the same way that when I'm improvising on a blues in A, stuff like that. See, I've played that phrase a couple of times there. All of that stuff is like again, musical diarrhea. It's stylistically correct. It's stuff that I play when I'm not looking for a strong melody. If I'm going for... Those are very strong melodies. Now there. When I do stuff like that, that's me going more into that muscle memory side of things. So what am I getting at here? What I want you to do is I want you to go away, and I'm not talking about the real book, I'm just talking about jazz standards in general, and going to early jazz standards. Pick something like Opus No. 1, or Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swing, you know, or Drop Me Off in Harlem. Anything that you're likely to hear Duke Ellington play, or the Count Basie Orchestra, or you know, early, where it's not bebop influence, where you don't have people playing fast, complicated, like harmonically complicated stuff. Listen to the early improvisers and see how they stylistically approach things, in the same way that you learn how to speak the language by listening to people speak and copying the way that they communicate with each other. When you can do that, when you have that basic understanding of, well, here's a simple standard, I'm familiar with the changes on it. I mentioned Joy Spring, it's a little bit more complicated, but still, you know, when you listen to people solo on that, there's things that you will learn from it. So take something like that and listen to what, there goes the boiler, listen to what other people do on something like that, and copy the phrases verbatim. Treat it as musical vocabulary, treat it as a language, copy what they do, and then after the fact you can worry about the more complicated stuff. If you can't play simple melodic content over stuff like this and see these simple ideas of simple melodies, tension and resolution, notes of the chord, approach notes and stuff like that, scales, arpeggios, all of that stuff is just unnecessary, at least in my opinion. You know, go and check out Jimmy Bruno's No Nonsense Jazz Guitar. I think that's one of the better instructional videos for this type of thing. So there we have it, guys. A big thank you to, well, for anyone that's sat and watched me for half an hour talk about Josh Smith. Josh Smith is one of the great blues players, so go and check him out. I want to say thank you to these people over here. These are some of my supporters over on patreon.com. Thank you so much for all of the support, guys. You guys mean that I can keep doing these videos. And I do them for you as well. And your contributions mean that people that can't afford to support me on Patreon get access to my content anyway, because it's free to them. YouTube free. But if you do want to join us, you can get lots of cool stuff in return over on Patreon for as little as $1. Check us out by clicking, let's go this way, this button up here, subscribe by clicking this button down here, and you'll see 2 more of my videos here and here. Thanks for the support, guys. Hope you have a great holiday, and I will be uploading lots more videos for you to check out soon. Peace.